we'll start the recording. Recording is in progress. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Oh, Ryan, sorry, I need to I need to become the host again. Can you make me this?
All right. Yep. 1 second here.
Classic Zoom. Sorry, everyone. 1 second.
I call this the screen share shuffle. Let's see. There you go.
Hey, every time. Okay. There we go. All right. Is everyone seeing my slideshow? My screen now?
Yep, I can see it.
Thank you, Betty. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Rosie Briggs. I'm joined by my colleague Ryan Call, and we're from EcoCycle, which is a third-party local recycling and zero waste nonprofit, which is facilitating this training for the South Metro cities tonight. So this is a resident champion training for the recycling and waste diversion efforts for the South Metro cities. And I just want to say early on that this training is for the residents of Centennial, Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. So if that isn't you, you're welcome to stay on out of curiosity, but that's just what this training is about tonight. So we will have designated times for questions, but if you do have questions throughout the presentation in between those times, feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can type those questions in and we'll answer them either verbally or through text if it's easy through the Q&A box. And also feel free to use the chat box, which is also down below, to just interact with the other attendees and maybe comment, maybe share resources, whatever you feel like doing there. And then this training is being recorded finally. So we want to start off by just thanking you for joining us tonight. This is the proven best way for communities to move forward with recycling. It's just with caring community members like you spreading the word and getting involved. That's how recycling began. Community recycling began in the state of Colorado as a grassroots movement, and that's how we continue to really make the best progress moving forward. So thank you so much for showing up on this Wednesday evening. We'll start with our goals for the evening. So our first goal is just to increase your understanding of recycling and waste diversion, its impacts and its benefits, and how you can best participate in these programs and maximize their benefits. I know several of you, just seeing you tonight, I know you already are really experts in recycling and waste diversion. So thank you to those of you who are, and thank you to those of you who are beginners. Hopefully we'll all learn something tonight, but I know that several of you will be well versed in some of this stuff. The second goal is to just empower you to have conversations in your community, and again, kind of deepen the impact if you'd like to have any impact in this in your community. So we're going to go over some frequently asked questions and do some myth busting. Then we're going to talk about some peer-to-peer outreach best practices. And then we're going to talk about a toolkit that will be kind of a follow-up resource for you after we've completed this training, which should finish up no later than 7:15 this evening. So when you leave tonight, you'll have a training, or right afterward, I'll send you the toolkit. So the toolkit will just kind of be everything we talk about tonight and a little bit more, so that you can have it for reference. You don't have to be taking notes as I'm talking tonight, and you'll have support moving forward from us and from the South Metro representatives. So there's not really any requirements of you to be clear as a resident champion training, or as a resident champion, excuse me. We're just here to kind of answer your questions, make you feel empowered to have conversations that you feel comfortable having, and be ready to kind of be part of the whatever next steps there are as you see fit. So now the agenda, I just did some introductions. We're going to just do a little bit of background on where we stand in South Metro currently. Then we're just going to dive into the recycling guidelines and benefits training. So we're going to talk about why we even care about recycling, why we're talking about it tonight, what are the benefits to our community, and then also go over specifically the guidelines. What can we recycle, what can't we recycle, and why? And then some frequently asked questions, some common misconceptions, so that if you're kind of hearing these common misconceptions or myths out in the community, you can say, oh, I actually know the answer to that. And it's also, again, all written down in your toolkit, so no need to kind of memorize what we're saying tonight. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions. I know everybody has plenty of burning recycling questions that they've never gotten answered, so hopefully this is your opportunity. And then we're just going to finish by talking about how to, once you know this information, how are you going to spread it in your community, how to have these conversations that are productive and kind of collaborative in our community. And then we'll just talk about some next steps. So that's what we're doing here tonight. So I'll start with the baseline. So what do the South Metro cities currently offer for recycling and waste diversion? So our South Metro cities include Centennial, Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. And they all have recycling curbside as an option for folks. It might depend on your HOA, but Sheridan does have universal recycling, which means that you just automatically get it with your trash, as opposed to the opt-in options, which mean you have to kind of sign up. Curbside composting is also available in all of these cities besides Englewood. And again, it might depend on your HOA or if you live in a multifamily complex, which is considered a little bit different from single family homes to haulers. And those composting options are opt-in. All 4 cities have special collection events, including electronics and household hazardous waste. So that's great. And bulky items for Sheridan. And none of the 4 cities have a central recycling drop-off. So this is just kind of our baseline. This is where, we're talking about 4 different cities. So we do have a variety of what's available to you as residents and what resources are available, what you can do with your waste. I know, again, just seeing the faces on this call, I know several of you already do really creative stuff with a lot of the waste you find yourselves left over with after you've kind of exhausted these resources from the cities. So that's a really great way that you're already acting as resident champions, is by going above and beyond the infrastructure that you're already given. But this is the infrastructure that we're given. So before we talk about how to recycle and specifically what it looks like, we're just going to talk about a little bit why we care about recycling and why we like to talk about it as a solution, and why the cities are examining recycling and waste diversion as solutions in the first place. So we'll just talk a little bit about environmental and climate benefits, and then some economic benefits as well. So the environmental benefits of recycling to some might just seem like a matter of, a piece of waste taking up space or maybe acting as pollution. But it's really all about the broader impact of our stuff and kind of how we make it, how we get it, how we dispose of it, how we transport it. So I really want you to think about your waste not just as like when you interact with it, but where it comes from. How did we get it in the first place, and where does it go after it leaves your house or your hand? So 42%, this is a statistic from the EPA, 42% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions are consumption emissions, which essentially just means it's the footprint of our stuff. So whether we're talking, like bottles or computers or toothbrushes, whatever we're talking, all of our stuff has a footprint. And so the consumption emissions refers to the emissions that result from mining or extracting the virgin material in the first place, and then smelting and refining and producing it into a product, and then transporting it. Then we consume it, then we dispose of it. The emissions of that entire process for all of our stuff is huge. So it's really important that we're examining our stuff while we're examining, like how do we what do our cars run on? How do we power our buildings? Things like that are important. And also it's really important to look at our stuff and how are we consuming it? Where is it coming from? How are we dealing with it? So the cool thing about recycling is that, I just laid out this kind of linear process of refining or extracting, mining, refining, smelting, producing, transporting, consuming, disposing. And the cool thing about recycling is that rather than, looking at it in this linear way, which means that we constantly have to be feeding this linear process with new virgin materials, we can just go like this. Instead, we can kind of skip some of these steps and then turn it into, we take the resources we already have and we continue to turn them into new things without having to have additional input or additional output. So You can see here's a graphic of kind of the different savings of different materials. So aluminum is a really great example of a recyclable material, and one that really makes sense because it's infinitely recyclable. And it has a pretty big upstream impact in terms of where we get it. So we could, do this very energy intensive and emissions intensive process to get to mine, virgin bauxite and turn it into aluminum. Or we could just turn aluminum into aluminum and kind of skip that whole process, which includes a lot of ecological and kind of social irreparable damage. So aluminum makes a lot of sense for us to recycle, and all of these materials do. You can see that they have kind of varying impacts, but they all do make sense to recycle. Any of these that you're recycling, there's no question about it. It is always a savings, whether it's, you can see here it's measuring carbon savings, BTU saved, so energy savings, and then gallons of gasoline saved. So we're talking fossil fuels, we're talking emissions, we're talking natural resources. There's all kinds of benefits for recycling, and although it varies in from item to item, from material to material, it always makes sense to recycle. There's not a material where the energy or the resources it takes to recycle it is more than it would take to create a virgin version of that product. So recycling is a win, and it makes sense, and it's a great investment for us for the environment. But it's also a great investment for us for the economy. So these are just a few kind of statistics about the economic benefits of recycling and zero waste. One of them is recycling creates 9 times more jobs than trash per ton. So if we're landfilling a ton versus recycling a ton, there are 9 times more jobs in recycling than in landfilling. There's also twice as many jobs in composting than landfilling, and there's 4 times as many jobs in composting as incineration. So again, like, the more we're keeping things in circulation and kind of diminishing the input and output ends, the more kind of abundance there is, the more jobs there are, in addition to getting all we can out of those resources. Reuse creates as many as 30 times more jobs than landfills. Recycling jobs typically have a low barrier to entry and offer an average of $70,000 in wages and benefits a year. The US could create 1.1 million new jobs if we were recycling 75% of our discards. That's not, 75 would be a really good goal for us to be hitting. We're not at that, but that's a great, way to visualize the economic impacts of that. And then recycling creates job growth and opportunities for entry-level and mid-level workers, and it can replace jobs lost in manufacturing, not to mention kind of fossil fuel industries. And, as we're pivoting away from some of these, maybe plastics industries and moving towards some of these solutions. So, no matter who you're talking to, recycling makes sense, right? It makes sense for us to be conserving these natural resources for ourselves because we're investing in those when we, extract them from the earth and turn them into something. But it also makes sense because, it creates jobs for us to recirculate them. So makes sense all around. So now that we kind of set the stage with our cities, and then why we're even talking about these solutions in the first place, why we're looking at them as a community in the first place. Now we're going to get into the dirty details of what is recyclable and what's not. So I will preface this conversation by saying that as of right now, there's no universal set of guidelines for all of you on this call. You have 4 separate cities, and within those cities, you have different haulers. And so the hauler, when I say hauler, I mean the truck that comes to pick up your recycling. If you pay attention to what it says on the side of that truck, then you can talk to them about what they accept and what they don't. So we are moving as a state toward universal recycling guidelines. So soon we'll be able to, anytime we're having a conversation within Colorado, we'll be able to say, be able to look at the same set of guidelines and talk about what's recyclable and what's not. For now, there's a little bit of variation from place to place because it depends on local facilities and local markets. So this training is going to be a little bit more general. It's just going to be really common, if not universal, recyclables as well as contaminants. And then as soon as I'm done with this section, we'll have some time to talk about questions that you have about materials. And then I'll get to the end of the training, but just so we'll have time to talk about specific like item questions that I know you all have. All right. So let's start with paper and cardboard. So this is all stuff, well, before I say paper and cardboard, this is all stuff that you would put in the same recycling bin. So just in case you're someone who's used to multi-stream recycling and, you know, maybe you just moved here and you had a bin for glass, you had a bin for magazines, you know, you had multiple collections. We're talking about single stream recycling. So all of your recyclables go in one bin, but that bin is still separate from your trash bin and your compost bin, if you have a compost bin. So all this stuff, this single stream stuff then goes to your local recycling facility. So EcoCycle runs the Boulder County Recycling Facility. Yours might go to one of the 2 facilities in Denver. Again, just call your hauler and you can kind of track where your stuff is going. But at that facility, that's where we sort stuff out one from the next. So we're sorting cardboard in one bale, we're sorting glass in another. We're taking all of these materials and separating them into their own categories so then they can go off to their own markets and be turned into something new, but we have to separate them first. So some of these, I'm just prefacing it that way because some of these, the reasoning behind what's recyclable and why and how to recycle it is dependent on that facility and kind of understanding that at those facilities we're sorting and also there's real people doing that sorting and it's a very hands-on, complicated process. So I'll start with paper and cardboard. This is a pretty simple category. Corrugated cardboard is a really common one. It's a really great one to recycle because it's really high quality in terms of fiber and paper. It can be, that is to say it has a lot of lives in it. You can recycle it a lot of times. So that, examples of that are just like, your regular online order cardboard box or, a pizza box is an example of corrugated cardboard, although we wouldn't want you to recycle that one if it was covered in pizza, which I will talk about. But corrugated cardboard, and then we have paperboard, which is like a cereal box, it's a tissue box, it's a pasta box. If something like a tissue box or a pasta box has a little, see-through plastic window, which they often do, it's great if you want to tear that out. If you don't, it's okay. It's not really treated as a contaminant. We're able to take that plastic out. But if you want to go the extra mile, newspapers, magazines, catalogs, stuff you get in the mail, all of this is recyclable. When it comes to the mail, just make sure you're checking it out. Like make sure you're just opening junk mail, even if you know you're going to recycle it, just to make sure like if they sent you something plastic, like a credit card, or a stickers or like stamps or a magnet or something like that. So just go ahead and remove that plastic stuff. And then most of the stuff is in there is recyclable as paper. The one thing to kind of look out for in the mail that is a little bit tricky is if they do send you something like a gift card that's stuck onto a piece of paper, it's stuck with this stuff that we call booger glue, which is a gross term, but it is pretty descriptive of that stuff. I think you can probably picture what I'm talking about. It's this really sticky like ball of glue. That stuff, although it's really small, it's a really small detail, is pretty harmful in the recycling process. When they're making new paper, it's really hard to get that stuff out and keep it from just ripping the whole process. So if you can get that kind of booger glue out, that's great. And otherwise, besides plastic stuff, mail is fine. Again, the like little window in a bill is something that's okay in the recycling. Yeah, booger glue is a fun term. Okay, and then office paper, like notebook paper, printer paper, stuff like that, it's all good. And then paper bags that you'd get at, the grocery store. And then the kind of the bottom line here is just to make sure that all paper and cardboard items are flattened. And so part of that is, again, if you bring your imagination back to the recycling center, we have all sorts of materials going around this facility. It's on conveyor belts, there's real people, there's robots, there's magnets, there's lasers, there's all sorts of crazy things. And one of the first things we have to do is separate kind of the papers and cardboard from the containers, so then we can go from there. And so that first sort is kind of dependent on whether the item is flat and light or kind of more three-dimensional and a little bit bulkier. And so if your box is going through as this like big bulky thing, it's not gonna get sorted accurately, and it's not going to kind of fit through the machinery anyway, which is prepared to kind of sort out flats versus rounds. So someone's going to have to kind of grab that box and try to take off tape and flatten it. And vice versa, if something, that's supposed to be sorted as a container, like aluminum foil, is perfectly flat, then we might sort it as a paper. So we just want you to keep paper and cardboards kind of flat, as flat as you can, and then containers just three-dimensional in some way, and that just helps the sorting process. If you were wondering, like why we always say to flatten cardboard boxes. So now non-plastic containers are, again, we just kind of talk about plastic as its own category because it's a little bit trickier, but non-plastic containers, aluminum cans and bottles, aluminum foil. So this is, what I just said about it being flat versus round. If you have aluminum foil, whether it's from like, maybe it was wrapped around a burrito or you used it for, some baking or something, we want that aluminum foil in a ball or in, a three-dimensional shape rather than a sheet. Because as I said, if it's a sheet, our machinery, our sorting system is going to consider it to be paper because it's flat and light and it acts like paper. So we just want it to be three-dimensional so it can be recognized not as paper. And then we want that shape of, that three-dimensional shape to just be at least 2 inches in diameter. And that's just so that it doesn't fall through what we call a fine screen. It's just a crack in the recycling center facility it's there to sort out glass. And if there's teeny little bits of things, like a little soda cap or a little tiny, like Hershey Kiss wrapper or something, that if it's under 2 inches, it's going to fall through that crack. So as a general rule, we just want things to be over 2 inches, including that aluminum ball. There's also aluminum pie plates, baking sheets, burrito bowl containers, catering trays, any of these kind of containers made of aluminum are good to recycle. Again, just, kind of keep them three-dimensional. Glass bottles and jars. Glass, like aluminum, is also infinitely recyclable, and we have a really strong, state glass market just kind of locally here in the Front Range in Colorado. So that's a really great one to contribute to and take advantage of, is the fact that we've worked really hard to create these local glass markets. So, here in the Front Range, if you recycle your glass, it just goes to kind of facilities nearby, and it can be back on the shelf as a new bottle within just a handful of weeks. I think the last statistic I heard was 5 to 6. So then steel cans, so like a bean can, like a cat food can. Steel aerosol containers, as long as they weren't like spray paint or pesticides or something crazy, that should be brought to the household hazardous waste facility. But if it's like, dry shampoo or like cooking spray, then that steel container, the aerosol container, is recyclable. And then lastly, one of the tricky ones is cartons. And so, your milk carton, your orange juice carton, sometimes it's soup, sometimes it's, coconut water or a protein shake. Anything that you would call a carton, besides an ice cream carton, is recyclable. And when you recycle those cartons, you can keep the little plastic cap on, even though it's not usually made, of the same stuff. All that stuff is facilitated through the carton industry itself. So that's why all that stuff is recyclable as cartons. We'll talk about this in the FAQ section, but just make sure containers are clean of food residue and liquid. Again, I'll go into more detail, but that's just a general rule for all the containers. And then lastly, we just have plastics. So this is the one that might get a little bit more variable from place to place, from hauler to hauler, from city to city at this point. But as a general rule, if you're looking at plastics and you're sticking to bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, you're going to be recycling kind of the vast majority of recyclable plastics. And again, feel free to call your hauler, talk to your city about your local guidelines. But if you have a plastic bottle, tub, jug, or jar, you can be pretty sure that it's recyclable, just, regardless of the recycling symbol or the number, which I will talk about in a little bit as well. But just bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars is just a mantra that is pretty easy to remember once you think about it. And then if those plastic containers have a little plastic lid or cap, you can keep them attached. Plastic on plastic is okay, since they're kind of the same material, even if they look like they're different resins of different types of plastics. They can be recycled together as long as that container is empty. Okay, and then Contaminants, these are just, again, some pretty universal contaminants in any recycling center. Food and liquid, again, we have real people there, so there's a concern for them getting sick from mold and, attracting wasps and rats. And, it also will contaminate loads if there's a lot of food and liquid. Think about everybody recycling their papers beautifully, and then a big container half full of yogurt just spills all over the paper. That's why food and liquid is an issue. Plastic bags are also a huge problem. We have all these turning, moving gears and wheels and things, going on conveyor belts, and plastic bags just do a great job of jamming up those gears and wheels and machinery and causing a huge problem. We have to kind of shut everything down and go in and cut out those plastic bags. So picture that kind of that imagery for the food and liquid and the plastic bags to kind of remember why they're a problem in the recycling center. And that's kind of easy messaging to pass on to somebody else if they're having trouble remembering. Batteries just, are scary in that they can cause, we can't recycle them, but also it'll cause a fire at our facility, or it can cause fires at our facility. So please keep batteries out of the recycling center. You can often take them to hazardous waste facilities, but check your local guidelines. Scrap metal is a really recyclable material in that there are markets to turn old metal into new, metal products. But it's a problem in the recycling facility because, again, we have real people, with real hands. So if you're putting, like the nails that are here through, they're going to get cut. People will put like an engine through, which is going to damage our very precious, conveyor belts. People put, coat hanger, like a whole tangle of metal coat hangers. And these are all things, again, that could be recycled as scrap metal, but, coat hangers are going to jam everything up. Like it's all just going to kind of damage our sorting equipment. So that's why we need scrap metal to be recycled kind of separately in scrap metal collections or, buyers or whoever you have. Compostable stuff is just, I want to emphasize that it's different than recycling. Composting and recycling doesn't go to the same place. They go to, totally separate facilities. The stuff that makes up the plant matter, the plant fiber that makes up some of the compostable stuff, like the plate you see here, is just not recyclable. It's not the same stuff as paper. And it's also usually covered in food. And the stuff that looks a little bit more like plastic, like the cup, is made of corn. So we can't send it to the folks that we take, that turn plastic into plastic, because corn isn't the same. So we just want to emphasize, that if you do have access to compost, great. And if not, this is not stuff that you can just divert to the recycling just because it's totally separate. Hazardous materials, again, look for your local household hazardous materials facility, but this is just good stuff to keep out of the recycling. Polystyrene containers and packaging. So this is stuff that oftentimes folks refer to as recycling, as styrofoam, but the plastic is actually called polystyrene. It's a number 6. And this is something that I'll touch on this later, but we actually banned it in Colorado. It's now banned. It's not recyclable. There's no good markets for it. It's just not good stuff in the recycling. Bubble mailers are just, something we're seeing more and more of, and you can recycle them if you have access to a plastic bag recycling, at a grocery store or at a, recycling center. But not in the regular recycling. We can't sort and process the bubble mailers. Latex gloves are just trash, just hazardous, material, or just toxic or medical waste, or even if it's not medical waste, it's just not recyclable in the recycling. Light bulbs, again, check with your local hazmat guidelines, but please don't put them in the regular recycling. And sharps, again, real people sorting your stuff, they don't want to touch sharps, so please keep them out. I will now stop to take some questions about any of these guidelines. I know I just really ran through a lot of stuff that's recyclable, a lot of stuff that's not. Again, I know a lot of you are experts already, but let's give some time for questions. I haven't been monitoring the chat or anything, but feel free to unmute or just put it in the Q&A feature.
Rosie, those of us that use Ridwell, we give them our batteries and unbroken light bulbs. And also those plastic bottle caps
Mm.
and fabric. They
Right.
do take some other stuff, but that's mostly what I focus on from mine.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a lot of stuff. And like, again, Betty, you're already, a resident champion for, I know that you spread the word a lot for Redwell. So that's an example of how, currently not all residents have access to these hard to recycle opportunities, but like there are certain community resources that are offering them. And it's great that you're already taking advantage and already spreading the word. So maybe that's something, that will spread more. I'm seeing, okay, are paper bags recyclable? Yes. Paper bags are fine to be recycled. Again, reuse it if you can, reduce it if you can bring your own bag, of course, but you can recycle it. What about small scraps of paper, such as small sticky note? That's a great question, Connie, thank you. So I mentioned kind of a size restriction of 2 inches when I was talking about the aluminum foil. And so that's, again, it's called the fine screen. And it's where it's how a recycling center filters out glass. So glass, we just can't be like touching it and kind of, grabbing it out with our hands because it'll cut folks, but we also can't use a magnet, or it's just a tricky one. So one of the things that we do, or that most recycling centers do, is kind of break it on purpose before anything else is processed. And then they run it over kind of a 2-inch crack, or generally 2-inch crack, so that those now broken glass pieces can fall through the crack and everything else can kind of pass over and then be sorted from there. The glass can then be sorted in its own way. So if you are putting in little scraps of anything, whether it be paper or, plastic caps, like the ones that Betty mentioned with Redwell, or, like I mentioned, a tiny little piece of aluminum, that stuff is going to fall through the glass crack and contaminate the glass stream. So for paper or for anything, we just want it to be at least 2 inches big in one direction. So like I just say diameter. So like for paper, we say, like a sticky note is right on the edge. We'd say like the size of your palm is kind of the guideline. So sticky notes are different sizes, but I would say if it's the size of your palm or bigger, it's recyclable. If it's smaller, you can usually compost it. But please keep the tiny little scraps out of the recycling. Clothes are a tricky one as well. That's considered, I think at this point, it's considered a hard to recycle material. It's definitely hard to recycle. I don't really know how many people are using the word recycle because it's often just kind of reuse markets. And so I think we have a long way to go on clothes. But there are some options there's like kiosks for, it's called US Again or Use Again. There's so many thrift stores. You can ask, maybe a local vet's office if they need rags for, pet beds. There are creative things we can do, but please keep clothes out of the curbside recycling for now. Could a little paper be put inside a larger paper bag or something? That's a great question, Connie. I know we get that one a lot. Anything that's like bagged in something else just isn't really going to get recycled because a lot of people do kind of put stuff in bags to be recycled, and then we have to like go try to shake it out because of course we then have to separate one material from the next. And again, like a paper bag full of something wouldn't be really processed the same way as like a flat piece of paper or a flat paper bag. So yeah, I love the thinking behind that. But the best thing to do is you can drop off shred. There are certain shred drop-offs if you have to shred something. And you can if you have access to a composting option that it would accept shredded paper, that's something else. The best thing to do is just kind of keep paper as big as we can so they can be recyclable, but also it just means that there's more lives in it to be recycled. Where is there a way to get these recycling facilities locate? Okay, yeah. That you can tour the Boulder County Recycling Center. I can send more information about this, but that's the one that Ryan and I work at in Boulder County. But there's also 2 recycling centers here in Denver. I can also send information about those. It's sometimes really helpful to see the facilities in action. Ridwell, Ryan knows the owner, the operator of Ridwell better than I do, but I'm not sure if they do tours. I can include some links about Ridwell as well.
Yeah, if I could speak up on
Please,
that,
yeah.
if you'd like, I can definitely get you in contact with their general manager. I've toured their warehouse. It's so Ridwell and both of the Denver area MRFs are the term, material recovery facility. It's a recycling sorting facility. All three of those facilities are all in the North Denver area.
Yeah, really cool that we have kind of a lot of things, a lot of resources and local facilities here. We also, I forgot about this when someone asked about fabrics, but we also do have a really cool facility here in the Front Range, if not kind of the metro area, that is working on textile kind of repurposing and repairing and some recycling. So I can try to think of what that is and send that as well, but that's exciting. Okay, why no ice cream cartons? That's a great question. Frozen vegetable cartons, also a great question. So if something is designed to live in the freezer, even if it looks a lot like its counterpart that's not designed to live in the freezer. So like a good example is like a cereal box, I said earlier, is recyclable. Paperboard is recyclable. A popsicle box that looks just like a cereal box but is designed to live in the freezer isn't recyclable because it has, if it's again designed to live in the freezer, it has this additive that's supposed to keep, prevent freezer burn. And so not every single packager does this, like not every single manufacturer does this. I know at least, one local company has come to us, EcoCycle, to say, can we just not use this additive and then our boxes could be recyclable. But the issue is that, in a recycling center, we have people looking for contamination. Like that may be what they're doing the whole time they're there. And so if frozen food boxes and ice cream cartons and frozen vegetable cartons are, one of the contaminants that they're looking for, they can't like pick it up and see which brand it is and then like remember which ones use the additive and which don't. So until we make kind of the entire industry, redesign or change, which I think, we're on track to do. We're doing a lot of really exciting stuff lately. That's just why the stuff can't be recycled. That's freezer stuff. So if it's a freezer thing, just think of freezer burn. If number 6 is banned in Colorado, why are to-go cup lids still made with the number 6? Another great question from Connie. So number 6, yeah, is the polystyrene that was just banned under the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. And actually, so Ryan works really directly on policy. Do you want to answer that, Ryan?
Yeah, that kind of went back and forth during the policy development, and where the law landed on was focusing on expanded polystyrene foam, or EPS. And that's again kind of that material that's often referred to as styrofoam, even though that's a name brand. The policy really focuses just on the expanded foam, although there is interest in looking at phasing out polystyrene as a whole, because like several other types of plastics, it is a known human carcinogen. It's crazy that we serve food off of this stuff. So I think that polystyrene is going to be similar to how we look at like smoking on airplanes in the future.
Totally. I get really freaked out when I see people put like hot coffee directly in it, which if you have been, it's okay. Like that's part of the thing, is that like we have to, get to these systemic solutions, because as individuals, we're not set up for success. Okay. Great. So these are all great questions. And again, please, you can continue to put them in the Q&A. Is there a Q&A feature? Like, is everyone, am I missing one, or is everyone just putting it in the chat?
I just see the chat.
Okay, then let's just use the chat as that. I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry for talking about a non-existent feature, but I'm glad we're all using the chat. That worked great. Please continue to use it. And okay, what about plastic utensils? That's a great question. Plastic utensils are not recyclable. They're brittle, they're small, they're made of some variable plastics, but it's just not a marketable item. There's again some compostable versions, which again is just tricky, but for utensils, just try to bring your own whenever you can, is my answer there. Okay, I am now just going to move on, but we again, please feel free to continue putting questions in the chat, and then also we'll have some more time for questions and to chat through everything. Okay, so yeah, now we already touched on some of this, but these are just some frequently asked questions about recycling. So again, a lot of this stuff you might know. Some of this stuff you
Hey,
might know,
Rosie,
some of it. Oh yeah.
were you gonna share your screen again? Did you refer to something that was visual?
Oh, it says I'm still screen sharing.
Oh,
Interesting.
maybe I just needed to tab over. My bad.
No, that's okay. Can others see my screen? It says frequently asked questions. I see Karen nodding. Okay. Okay, so the purpose of this section is to, you know, answer a question you may have, but it's also to kind of equip you to have a conversation if you hear these frequently asked questions kind of out in your community or within your family or your friends or your, you know, your communities. You'll be equipped to have this conversation, and all of the stuff I'm about to present to you is in your toolkit, so you can always be like, here, I don't remember everything, but here's the answer to that question. Okay, sorry, now I have things like over my slide. There we go. Okay, so the first question that I'll start with is, do my recyclables actually get recycled? We've been getting this question a lot in the past 5-ish, even more years, just because a lot of people read in the news that China stopped recycling or stopped accepting US recyclables. So the answer is your materials will be recycled if you're properly recycling or you're properly following recycling guidelines, if you're giving your recycler what they're asking for. So if you missed it, in 2018, China passed their national sword policy, which in effect banned recycling from the US and other countries. So there were many American recyclers who were sending plastics, but also some fibers to China. And there's kind of different approaches you can take as a recycler, but that was one that many recyclers were taking. And so I sometimes you know, the analogy I'll use for this is like, pretend we're kids and, you know, we're in our bedroom and our parent walks in and says, time to clean your room. And we say, okay. And then we like shove everything under our bed rather than cleaning our room. And then every time that happens, like we're just putting more and more stuff under our bed. And so with the national sword policy, essentially the bed was lifted up and we were like, oh, we haven't been really cleaning our room in the way that we should have been from the beginning. And now we have this big pile to look at. And so now we can kind of make decisions based on what's left, like based on this pile. So that's kind of how I explain why this was actually a positive thing, even though when it happened, a lot of people were really like scared, and I think still are you know, freaked out or have, you know, some trust issues about where the recycling is going, whether it's just being landfilled, is it just being dumped somewhere. So hopefully this, you know, will help kind of ease those concerns. And as always, those concerns I can appreciate are always coming from a place of like, if someone is concerned about where their recycling is going and maybe not participating as a result of those concerns, that means that they care in the first place. Like that means that they care about recycling and its impact, and, you know, whether it's genuinely happening. So some of the positive effects of the national sword policy, because again, we're looking at this pile of stuff where our bed used to be, it created this opportunity for us to like really get to the root of these solutions and create some really good domestic approaches to these problems, which included, you know, this opportunity to create new markets for recycled materials within our country. So in Colorado, the Circular Economy Development Center was created to attract businesses to the state to purchase our recyclables to create new products. So, you know, back in the beginning when I was talking about why recycling makes sense and how, you know, like rather than mine, you know, a virgin material down in the tropics and then like have it be refined up in Iceland and then have it be transported everywhere and then, you know, we landfill it and we do it again, we can be creating these kind of local and domestic markets instead, where the, you know, the materials are not only staying in circulation, but they're staying in circulation, you know, in a way that geographically makes sense, in a way that kind of strengthens local economy and local infrastructure. let's see. And then the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, as Ryan and I were just talking about, it prohibits the distribution of problematic and unrecyclable plastics. Like, yeah, Connie brought up with a number 6 plastic, which is cleaning up recycling. So again, you know, when as a country we were like recycling all this stuff, and then China, again, we lifted our bed up. Number 6, a polystyrene, was one of the things that big time had been piling up under the bed, where we were like, wow, this is really isn't getting recycled. Like nobody could really recycle this in a real way. And it doesn't really make sense anyway. It's so toxic, as Ryan was saying, like it's, we shouldn't even be producing it, let alone eating off it. So let's just get rid of it. So I don't, you know, who's to say, but I think that, I don't know that that would have happened without this market change. And so that was a big, you know, this momentum that we've now had to do legislative things is kind of amazing. Okay. The next question is, if I'm not sure if something is recyclable, should I put it in the recycling bin just in case? All right, so the answer is please just stick to the recycling guidelines. We appreciate, again, it comes from a good place. Wish cycling is what we call it, when you're just like, I hope it's recyclable. Like I want to be participating in recycling. So I wish that this is recyclable and I'll put it in just in case. So again, wish cycling is the term for that. It comes from a good place. We can appreciate the motivation behind it, but it often causes more problems than you know, than it's worth. Again, a lot of the contaminants that we already talked about damages our machinery. It causes health and safety issues for our sorters. You know, it reduces the value of the recycling loads in the markets. So, you know, we just say if it's listed in the guidelines, put it in the bin. Again, you can find your guidelines through your hauler. If you need help, you know, finding your guidelines, you can always just reach out to us and we can help you get to the bottom of it. In the recycling industry, we often say, when in doubt, throw it out. At EcoCycle, we say, when in doubt, give us a shout, because we do, you know, a lot of our of what we do is talking to people about what's recyclable and how to find out. So, you know, give us a shout, give your local hauler a shout. And if that's not available, just put it in the landfill or put it in the trash and know that you're doing less harm by not putting it through the recycling as a potential contaminant. The next FAQ is it okay if I bag my recyclables in a plastic bag? So we already touched on this a little bit with the bagging. But we ask that you don't, when in doubt, figure it out, says Betty, yeah. Oh, that's a good question about lids, Karen. I'll get to that in a minute. Oh no. Okay. So we say, please do not put your recyclables inside plastic bags or in any bags. So as I described in the beginning, a big part of what a recycling center does is sort one material from the next, because we have to, you know, get all of the cardboard together in one place that's different from all of our steel, because we're sending those to 2 completely different markets who are doing completely different things with them. And so, but as I said in the very beginning, you have single stream recycling at your house, that you're putting them all in one bin. So if you give us a bag full of stuff that's all mixed, there's no way we can sort all those materials out unless a real person at the facility is like, oh no, a bag, and runs over and tries to take it off the rapidly moving conveyor belts and rip it open and try to shake it out so we can sort it from there. So even if it's a paper bag, we just like, everything needs to kind of be loose so we can sort it. And then we also, like we talked about, plastic bags themselves are really problematic contaminant in any recycling center, because, as we said, there's, you know, all these moving gears and wheels and pieces of machinery, and plastic bags just jam that up. Yeah, the debagging, like having someone run over and tear open a bag, is not part of the process. You know, like I touched on earlier, the people who are doing the hand sorting at the recycling facility you will not believe how quickly they're moving. And again, I would recommend a tour. You can really appreciate the work. They're moving so quickly, and they're often doing 2 different things with different hands. So like, or multiple different things. So like with my left hand, I could be hand sorting cartons, and with my right hand, I could be looking for contaminants. And so, you know, stopping everything to run over and open your bag is not part of their process. It just really slows everything down, and it can endanger people because it's just not part of what they're supposed to do. So I always just, you know, recycle my recyclables kind of loose in my curbside bin. If I live in whether I live in a multifamily complex or a single family home, I've always just kind of put stuff in a bin and then you can just put it loose. You can reuse a paper bag, you can reuse a plastic bag. Like we'll talk about in just a second, your stuff shouldn't be, covered with food and liquid anyway. So that shouldn't be gross to be kind of reusing the container, even if you have to rinse it out once in a while. But that's kind of the best practice, just to make sure that your recyclables are staying loose and not bagged, and that you're not contributing a plastic bag to the contamination at the facility. Okay, and then so that brings us to another FAQ, which is how clean do my recyclables need to be? People are often concerned with like, if I use too much water, am I undoing the good I would have done by recycling the item? And the answer is no. Like there's so many water savings. I had that graph in the beginning that was kind of carbon savings and energy savings and things like that. But water savings and resources, is another huge thing, and you wouldn't be undoing it. But we also don't want you to, like use gallons of water or put it through the dishwasher or anything like that. So our answer is that food is a big deal. Like we've talked about, it's a huge contaminant in the recycling center. It's maybe tied for #1 with plastic bags. And the concerns there are mold, rats, wasps, like things that would harm human beings, and then spilling onto other papers and then just or onto other materials and then just kind of reducing the value of the entire load, because then that will mold and, it's just not good stuff for the markets to deal with. But, know that if you have one speck of peanut butter that you weren't able to get out of your peanut butter jar, that won't create a load to be thrown out. So it is kind of a judgment call, but we just say, just make sure it's empty. So just try to, if it's food, just try to scrape everything into the compost. If you have a compost, pour liquids out, just like hang it upside down for a minute. And then if you have access to a sink in that moment, try to give it a rinse. So just like a quick shot of water, like put your hand over it or put the cap back on, just like shake it up. That's sufficient. If there's a little residue, if it's a little greasy, that's okay. If it is something like peanut butter, a spatula works great. A spoon, giving it to your dog are all some hacks. It looks like, yeah, people are sharing the hacks in the chat. Warm water, soap and a brush. Yeah, I agree with Betty. That's a good way to do peanut butter jars. Yeah, using it to kind of collect gray water is another one. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, I think, this question is something that people really are really worried about. Like they're really worried that if there's a little bit of food that they just shouldn't recycle anything, to, which we would reply, that's great that you're so concerned about contamination. Thank you for being so conscious about it. And also know that, like one little bit of residue isn't going to turn the whole thing sour. It's just keeping in mind, like, what the problems really are. Again, mold, rats, wasps, spilling, that stuff. Okay, so now we're nearing kind of the end of our presentation, and then we can have a little bit more time for questions, but we're just going to end by talking about, now that you've gotten all this information, again, many of you already have way more information than this, how to talk about recycling and waste diversion in your community. And as I kind of laid out in the beginning, the goal of this training is to kind of equip you to, feel good about having these conversations, like feel confident in your own knowledge of recycling and waste diversion, but also like as you hear other people have questions, you feel equipped to have those conversations. And the reason that we're giving this training is because the cities of South Metro are looking at ways to increase recycling and waste diversion. So they're considering different kind of policies and different perspectives in their community. And so this is kind of a first step in getting involved with that and kind of informing what that looks like and advocating for what you would like to see in your community. This is just kind of however you take it from here. These are just kind of some best practices to equip you as a resident champion for whatever you want to champion in your community. So we just have 9 tips for talking about waste diversion and recycling in your community. So the first one is to get informed. Once you're educated, you feel confident in educating others. You're already doing it right now because you're at this training. And again, many of you have already done lots of education before this and utilizing the toolkit that we will provide right after this. Number two is, and I've talked to a lot of you at the Zero Waste Gang about this pretty recently, so excuse the kind of repetition here, but for all of you that I have not met, number two is to find communication pathways within your existing communities. So we have a lot more impact than we might know. Like we talk to a lot of people, we influence a lot of people, even if we're not considering it, an outreach project, an outreach, effort. We have existing communities, and we interact with them all the time about things that we care about. So just give some thought about what groups and communities you belong to. You could consider family, friend groups, neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, places of worship, book clubs, HOAs, sports teams, anything, anywhere you kind of live, work, or play, interact with folks. And then think about just how do you communicate with them? How does this group communicate with itself? Do they have an email list, a bulletin board? Do they have regular meetings? Do they have like Nextdoor or Facebook, something like that? Just, keep an eye out, figure out how you communicate with your current communities. If you would like to kind of share what you've learned, share tips, share what you're passionate about, share what you would like to see in your community, you can then use those communication pathways to do that. In the toolkit, we have, again, like the FAQs that you can share. We have some tips that are just kind of copy pastable. You can reach out to us for if you want to go further. These are just kind of, giving thought to what communities you're part of and how you receive information through them is just a great place to start in thinking about how you could have impact if you wanted to do that. Number four is just keep your eyes and ears open. Noticing the thoughts and experiences voiced by your neighbors and community members is a really important part of any advocacy or any kind of championing for anything that you care about. Again, the cities of South Metro are approaching this just with openness about what the community wants to see in terms of recycling and waste diversion, what they need. And so just, being the eyes and ears and noticing what the culture is, what the questions are, what the, hesitations are, what the needs are, that's a great way to be a resident champion. Number five is draw from your own experiences and thoughts. This is, we're giving you a lot of kind of material from our end. And the most important thing to lead with is, why are you here? Like, what calls to you about this? Why are you passionate about recycling and waste diversion? And that's what's really going to be effective in any communication that you do. You could like regurgitate something that I tell you tonight, or, you can draw from your own, like I come from a community that was really polluted by plastics maybe, or like I, just had a baby and I'm worried about the future, or I hate how many trucks go up and down my street every day. Like there's so many ways that, that you interact with issues like this and, that have driven you to be passionate about it. And those are the things that are going to be effective in talking to anybody else about it. Number six is just always be kind. Anytime, even if it's like something that seems maybe not as emotional as other things like waste, you'd be surprised people get, attached to their perspective. And so, just a general rule in talking about trash is just to try to be light, try to be kind. Again, like identify, just speak from your own experience as a fellow community member. Don't like feel like, don't make anyone feel like anything's being imposed upon them, but also, for yourself as a resident champion and an advocate, know that you don't have to engage in anything that you don't want to engage with. If someone is like, this is my perspective on this and like, I'm not moving on it, then that's fine. There are plenty of people that we can have conversations with who are curious about answers and, want to engage and that we can hear perspectives from. And there's some people who are not wanting to have those interactions, and that's totally fine. 7 is just try to make it natural. So again, if you're just someone who's like, yeah, I want to go out and talk about the waste diversion policies that I want, like maybe, you really want an electronics recycling drop off, or you really want curbside composting. Rather than you don't have to feel like you have to go canvass door to door in your neighborhood, but maybe next trash day you can be, as you're rolling out your carts, you can start conversations about what you want to talk about with your folks. And again, this is kind of the stuff that we talked about in the beginning of this section, which is like how do you already interact with people just, build from there. I often use the trash day opportunity just because I'm like out in my alley with my neighbors, and they all know that I work in recycling. So that's when they ask me, their recycling questions. Number 8 is, on that note, you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be that person who like answers their neighbors' recycling questions. If you're willing and you're comfortable, like, many of you are experts already, awesome to be the peer resource and expert. And if you're not, always feel free to pass on the questions to the city representatives. I'll give you those contacts in the toolkit, to me, to EcoCycle. You can always just kind of, again, be the eyes and ears, be kind of the conversation haver on the ground, but you don't have to feel like you have to know everything. And then the last one is just stay tuned. So again, this is kind of the first step in, the next step, essentially. First step to the next step. The cities are in their exploratory phase, and they're going to move forward on whatever they're going to move forward on. So just stay tuned on what's going to happen, and how you can be part of it. And also remember that, like, you are part of it already, since you're here. And so don't be afraid to kind of have your voice heard, and not only in the conversations that you're having in your community, but also in any feedback that you're giving the city. This is the time to kind of help shape the waste diversion future that you'd like to see. Alrighty, so we have still about 10 minutes for, a little more than 10 minutes for questions. So I see that there are a few more questions in the chat, but I'll just finish off. This is my final slide with next steps. So this, you're now, you're now educated and, equipped, but you're also who the cities might call when they're ready to take kind of next steps. So whether it's, showing up for a city council meeting and telling them more about, how you feel and how conversations have been going in your networks, or, maybe it's talking to your community more specifically once there is a policy to kind of talk about more specifically. Maybe it's talking to your community once the policy has been passed about, like, how it can work for everyone, how everyone could participate. I think there's a lot of ways that you can be involved as a resident champion, and it might look like a lot of different things depending on where the city goes and depending on what you want to happen. So that's just kind of what I want to leave you with, is that, now I'm giving you some next steps, I'm giving you some tools, but really there's a whole lot to come here, and it might be diverse. So you're never, obligated to do anything, but you are really powerful in your community, and this is a real, there sometimes are few opportunities to get, like, directly involved with things that make a climate and community impact, but also kind of impact your day-to-day. And this is one of those things that will have a direct kind of tangible impact on your community, but also is a broad and exciting solution. So it's exciting that you're here, and it's exciting that you'll be able to take whatever you want to take from this. So after this training, as soon as I can just get both, we'll have it in English and Spanish together in an email to everyone. I'll just send the toolkit directly after this meeting. Again, once you get the toolkit, you'll also get these slides as well as this recording. So you can always go back if you want, but then you'll be kind of equipped to start some conversations in your networks using the toolkit, using these tools. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences directly with the city contacts listed in the toolkit. Like I said, this is a good time. They've done a lot of community engagement in terms of, like, surveys and focus groups and things, but if you, as resident champions, if you'd like to kind of make your perspectives heard and give them some feedback on the conversations you're having, you can utilize those contacts directly. Like I said, stay tuned for next steps in your city. It's exciting to be a resident champion. And then there is a website specifically for the South Metro Waste Diversion Project. I've linked it here for updates. So after this training, I'll just send you an email with the toolkit and the follow-ups, the slides, the recording, and then some of the other resources that we've talked about tonight, like Ridwell and things like that. So I will stop my screen sharing for now. And then we have about 9 more minutes to just wrap up with any questions. Again, know that you can continue to talk to us after this, talk to me, talk to South Metro. But yeah, this is our time to ask any questions that you can think of for now. Looks like Ryan has already answered some of these questions. Thank you.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
signs. Oh yeah, please, Betty.
How about if we help each other come up with posts that we can do like to next door? Simple little things. And then share that with each other so everybody then can post it to their next door feed so it gets hit there more than once.
Mm-hmm.
That might work.
Yeah, I love that. There's a little like to start you off in your toolkit, which again, sorry, I don't have it to share on the screen, but I will send it. There are some like just kind of plug and go examples of that. And then I have plenty beyond that if you'd like to go beyond. And I think that's a great idea for any resident champion who wants to partake.
Perfect. Then we can get everybody else to do it who are not resident champions, but who are really interested.
Exactly. Yeah, and like, like we've been saying, there's a lot of folks who wouldn't like seek out recycling guidelines or necessarily have access to that information. And, if there's someone in their life, someone in their community who does have that information, then that is like really where we move forward and like we really, create these ripples and community culture and understanding.
If I can just share a comment too, I've worked at EcoCycle for 3.5 years now. And, my biggest lesson outside of guidelines and, policy weeds is just the relationship part of making sustainable changes. We say it's reduce, reuse, recycle, and relationships that really make all these systems work. That's how we educate each other, empower each other, and, keep Earth's finite, valuable resources out of the landfill.
Yeah. Yeah. And it often feels like again, like I kind of was saying, it might seem funny to think about recycling or like trash conversations as being like heated or emotional, but they really sometimes are just because trash is like a deeply kind of personal thing. Like your stuff that came from you directly is just kind of personal. And then people get, like they want to make their own decisions. But yeah, the thing to keep in mind is like we can find solutions that work for every person that benefit every person in a bunch of different ways, and also don't really have don't alienate anybody, don't cut access off to anybody. There's a lot of exciting things we could do. Any other questions? It could be about resident champion stuff. It could just be like an item that you've always been wondering about.
What about compost when you're not paying for that service?
Like, what can you do? What are your options, or backyard composting? Or
Well,
I think you do back.
The biggest issue that we have with composting, if you don't do it right, is attracting rodents. And, one of the things that we do with our, 2 things, with our kitchen scraps, we feed it to our worm farm, which is in the garage, and it stays warm so it doesn't freeze. And then other stuff that when we get excess of that, we put it in a plastic bucket with the lid and leave it in the garage until it gets really sticky. And then we go dig a hole and bury it, put it in the ground and bury it, because no self-respecting rat's going to eat that, because they want to eat clean stuff. They want fresh food. That's why they live around humans. They want it fresh. Well, it isn't. And we've never had anything dig into those. But the worms love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can tell, like, Betty, that you're a dedicated composter and that you've just figured out what to do with what you have access to. So I think that's another great thing of like an example of things, that we can share through peer-to-peer outreach, like what you have become an expert in. and also, you know, then we can start conversations about like, how can we, you know, maybe give more access to composting to community members so it's more accessible. And yeah, it's great that we're interacting with waste diversion at kind of all levels and in creative ways, and there are so many conversations that we can have from there.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Thank you for
Once
doing this.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate, again, like those of you who are already resident champions in the community, and then for showing up tonight. Yeah, I will send a follow-up email, so then you can always just, if you think of anything further, questions or comments, you can always just reply to that email, and just have us as resources moving forward. And like I said, in the toolkit, I've included some resource or some contacts for your city representatives, so you can reach out to them as well. But thank you so much for your time tonight, everyone. I hope you go have a delicious dinner or watch the sunset or whatever you're about to do. We appreciate your time tonight, and yeah, thank you so much for whatever you do from here. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.